A very good morning to you. Happy Saturday. Well, we haven't got long to go, have we, before Easter and the celebrations we will have of the life-changing events of Easter weekend that we celebrate. But filling my mind for the last 24 hours has been the transfiguration of Jesus. It's recorded for us in Mark chapter 9, verses 2 to 8. It's in all three Gospels, of course, slightly different versions, slight additions here and there, but basically the same account, that 6 days after the first time that Jesus spoke to his disciples about what was going to take place in Jerusalem, and he had such a reaction from them, because Peter certainly couldn't believe that these awful things were going to happen to Jesus. Jesus was at the pinnacle of his popularity. Everywhere he went, people flocked to him. He was feeding thousands of people at a time. He was everything to them, and the thought that he would suffer and die was just mind-blowing to them. And 6 days after the first time he spoke about it to them, he went up with Peter, James, and John up this mountain. And some of his glory shone through, and his garments became whiter than any fuller on earth could make them. They had no bleach in those days, but they were able to make clothes quite white. But this was not white. This was dazzling white. This was unearthly white. And Elijah and Moses appeared and talked with him. And we understand Peter's feeling that, gosh, here's Moses and Elijah. We need to stay here. Once they've finished talking to Jesus, perhaps they'll talk to us. Perhaps we can ask Moses the questions we've always wanted to ask him. Ask him what it felt like to wear a veil over his face. Ask him what it felt like to be on that mountain for 40 days alone with God. What it felt like, what it was like eating manna day after. All the questions they wanted to ask him. And Elijah, what was it like on Mount Carmel with all those enemies around? Did you know for certain that God was going to come through? Did you ever doubt it? All the questions they would have loved. Gosh, if Moses came to visit you today, wouldn't you have some questions for him? Wouldn't you just want to sit and say, tell me the story again. Tell me in your own words. And of course, he was just trying to. They were stunned by what had happened. They somehow knew it was Moses and Elijah. I don't think they were wearing labels around them that said, "I'm Elijah, Moses." And then suddenly, they were enveloped in the cloud, and a voice spoke, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." And suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them, but Jesus only. Peter, when he writes his second letter in chapter 1, verse 15, says this, "For we did not follow cleverly devised myths when we made known to you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. For when he received honor and glory from God the Father, and the voice was borne to him by the majestic glory, 'This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased,' we heard this voice borne from heaven, for we were with him on the holy mountain." It was an impactful time, and Peter and James and John were forbidden to speak of it until after the resurrection. And so there's no record of Peter telling any of the others what had happened until after all the events were completed. And then in that letter, Peter reminds people that he was there. He was there. He saw this happen. He witnessed it. He saw the change in Jesus. He saw Jesus in a way he'd never seen him before. in a supernatural way, a supernatural way. And he got caught up in the moment, wanting to lengthen that time up on the top of the mountain with these three giants of faith, Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. And maybe he thought, well, this is another three. There's Peter, there's me, Peter, James, and John. Here is Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. And then the Father intervenes and takes away the two great heroes of faith. And Jesus, he pinpoints it. He says, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." And they saw no one but Jesus only. This is a warning to us, you know. We need to stay focused on Jesus. Anything we follow that distracts us from putting Jesus at the center of our conversation to unbelievers, of our discipleship training, anything that takes Jesus away from his rightful place as Lord and King and Master is to be avoided. Many of these things are not wrong, but they distract us from the core of our faith. The core of our faith should be focusing on Jesus. The enemy is very subtle. If he can distract us to something that focuses somewhere else, that focuses on something that is not rooted in the death and resurrection of Jesus, some other method of helping people, some other method of supporting people, of praying for people, a way that Jesus himself and the apostles in the New Testament did not teach, we should avoid it. God made it quite plain that although there was nothing wrong with Moses and Elijah, they're great, and they were needed that morning or that day to meet with Jesus up on the top of that mountain, to encourage him and strengthen him for what was coming. The focus was not to be on them, it was to be on Jesus. The simplest of songs is often the most profound, isn't it? Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Keep your eyes on Jesus today and be blessed. I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.